Blood dripped from Nicholas's knuckles onto the Persian rug. Lara stood trembling in his mahogany-paneled office, offered up like a lamb to slaughter to pay for a dead man's sins. His jaw tightened as he looked at her frail frame. "I don't want her. I never did." He snarled the words, cutting through the heavy, suffocating silence. He thought discarding her was a cold act of mercy. He didn't know the innocent girl he just threw to the wolves was the only soul alive who could pull him out of the dark. The rain in Houston didn't fall. It spat. It slammed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nicholas Rossi's penthouse office, blurring the neon lights of the city he owned. At 32, Nicholas was the undisputed head of the Rossi syndicate. He was a man carved from marble and violence, possessing a terrifyingly calm demeanor that made seasoned criminals sweat. Tonight, however, his patience was fractured. Kneeling on the imported Persian rug, weeping like a beaten dog, was Arthur Higgins. Arthur was a nobody, a low-level numbers runner who had somehow managed to skim $500,000 from the syndicate's offshore accounts to feed a catastrophic gambling addiction. "Please, Mr. Rossi!" Arthur begged, his voice cracking. He wrung his hands, leaving smears of blood from where Nicholas's enforcers had already educated him on the concept of respect. "I don't have the cash, the tables. They were rigged, I swear to God. But I brought you something better, an asset." Nicholas leaned back in his leather chair, the ice in his whiskey glass clinking softly as he swirled it. "An asset, Arthur. You stole $500,000. Unless you have a deed to a gold mine in your pocket, there is no asset that balances this ledger." Arthur scrambled to his feet, gesturing frantically to the heavy oak double doors. "Bring her in!" He yelled, his voice shrill with desperation. The doors opened. Two massive men in tailored suits stepped aside, revealing a girl. Lara Higgins. She couldn't have been older than 22. She wore a faded, oversized trench coat that looked like it had been bought at a thrift store a decade ago. Her dark, wet hair clung to her pale cheeks, and her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. But it was her eyes that caught Nicholas off guard. They were a striking storm glass blue, and unlike her pathetic father, they held no tears. She was terrified. He could see the rapid pulse at the base of her throat, but she wasn't breaking. "This is Lara," Arthur stammered, stepping behind her as if using his own daughter as a human shield. "She's smart, graduated top of her class in accounting well before she had to drop out to help me. She can work for you. She belongs to you now. A life for a life, Mr. Rossi. That clears my debt." Nicholas stared at the scene unfolding before him, a slow, dark disgust curling in his gut. The Rossi family operated in extortion smuggling and protection. They did a lot of things that guaranteed a one-way ticket to hell. But Nicholas drew a hard, uncompromising line at human trafficking. He didn't buy and sell people. He stood up towering over the desk. The sheer physical presence of the man made Lara take an involuntary half-step back. "You brought me your daughter," Nicholas said, his voice a low, lethal rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, "to pay for your degeneracy." "She's yours," Arthur repeated, a sickeningly hopeful smile twisting his bruised face. Nicholas's fist slammed into the desk with the force of a gunshot. Arthur flinched violently. Lara didn't move. "Get him out of my sight!" Nicholas ordered his men, not breaking eye contact with Lara. "Take him down to the docks. Make sure he understands the concept of a permanent exile. If I see his face in Houston again, I won't ask for my money. I'll ask for his lungs." As the guards dragged a screaming, protesting Arthur. From the room, the heavy oak doors clicked shut, leaving Lara alone with the most dangerous man in the city. The silence stretched suffocating and thick. Nicholas poured himself another splash of whiskey, deliberately ignoring her. He expected her to beg. He expected her to drop to her knees and plead for her life, just like her father. "What do you want me to do?" Lara asked. Her voice was quiet, melodic, but threaded with a steel that surprised him. Nicholas turned his dark eyes, sweeping over her in pure disdain. "I don't want you. I never did," he said coldly. "Your father is a worm who thought he could use his own flesh and blood as currency. You are a complication I neither asked for nor need." Lara swallowed hard, lifting her chin. "He said I belong to you now. I have nowhere else to go. The men he owed money to before you. They took our apartment. If you throw me out, I'm dead." It was a simple factual statement, no dramatics, just the brutal reality of the world her father had dragged her into. Nicholas pinched the bridge of his nose, a headache beginning to throb at his temples. The smart move was to put her on a bus to nowhere. But the memory of the thugs Arthur owed money to, men who had no moral compass whatsoever, flashed in his mind. If he threw her out, she would be dead by morning or worse. "You aren't a slave, Lara." Nicholas sighed, the malice leaving his voice, replaced by cold indifference. "But you are going to work off your father's debt. I own a restaurant in the Gold Coast district, the Velvet Room. You'll work in the back office, inventory, filing, whatever the manager needs. You will be given a small room above the kitchen. You keep your head down, you do your job, and you stay out of my world. We will never speak again." "Understood." Lara nodded slowly. "Understood. Good." "Leo," Nicholas called out. His right-hand man, Leo Moretti, stepped into the room. "Take Miss Higgins to the Velvet Room," Nicholas instructed, turning his back to her to look out the window at the rain. "She's an employee now. Treat her as such." As Lara turned to leave, she glanced back at the broad, imposing silhouette of the Mafia Boss. He had discarded her like a piece of trash, tossing her into the basement of his empire. But as she followed Leo out into the cold night, Lara made a silent vow. She wasn't going to be a victim, and she wasn't going to remain a nobody. 3 months passed. Lara Higgins became a ghost in the machine of Nicholas Rossi's legitimate business empire. The Velvet Room was a masterpiece of fine dining, a place where senators, celebrities, and made men rubbed elbows over $300 steaks and vintage Barolo. Lara spent her days and nights in a cramped, windowless office near the loading dock, buried under mountains of invoices, delivery receipts, and tax documents. She thrived in the silence. Numbers made sense. Numbers didn't gamble away their rent money, and numbers didn't lie. But as she meticulously audited the restaurant's books, Lara began to realize that someone was lying. It started small. A crate of truffles unaccounted for here. 3 bottles of 1990 Louis Roederer Cristal champagne missing there. At first, Lara assumed it was natural restaurant shrinkage, spoilage breakage, or light employee theft. But as her spreadsheets grew, a terrifying pattern emerged. The discrepancies weren't random. They were systematic, buried under layers of falsified vendor accounts and dummy corporations. Someone was skimming from the Rossi family. And they were skimming big. Lara traced the falsified signatures back to the supply chain manager. His name was Frankie Russo. Frankie wasn't just a manager. He was a capo in the Rossi syndicate, a heavy hitter who walked around the restaurant in tailored suits, terrifying the waitstaff and demanding free meals. She knew the rule Nicholas had given her, stay out of my world. But the theft was escalating. In the past month alone, Frankie had siphoned over $80,000. If the syndicate's accountants downtown found the discrepancy before she reported it, they might blame her. On a Tuesday night, the restaurant was closed to the public for a private meeting. Nicholas Rossi had arrived. Lara watched from the crack in the kitchen doors. Nicholas sat at a corner booth flanked by Leo Moretti and several other intimidating figures. He looked exhausted. The shadows under his eyes were deep. The streets were whispering that a rival faction, the Calloway family, led by the ruthless Victor the Snake. Calloway was making aggressive moves on Rossi territory. Blood had already been spilled in the south side. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, Lara clutched a manila folder to her chest and pushed through the swinging doors. The moment her cheap, sensible shoes hit the dining room floor, 3 of Nicholas's guards reached inside their jackets. "Hold!" Nicholas commanded softly, raising a hand. His dark eyes locked onto Lara, narrowing in annoyance. "I told you to stay in the back, Higgins. What is this?" "I need 5 minutes of your time, Mr. Rossi." Lara said, her voice shaking just a fraction before she steadied it. Frankie Russo, who was sitting 2 booths away, suddenly stood up, his face flushing dark red. "Hey, you little rat, get back in the cage. Boss, she's just a glorified secretary. I'll handle." "Sit down, Frankie." Nicholas didn't raise his voice, but the capo dropped back into his seat as if his legs had been kicked out from under him. Nicholas looked at Lara, his expression a mask of cold impatience. "You have 60 seconds. Speak." Lara stepped forward and placed the heavy manila folder on the polished mahogany table directly in front of him. "There's a leak," Lara said, keeping her voice low so only Nicholas and Leo could hear. "Someone has been altering the delivery manifests for the past 8 months. They are creating fake invoices from a shell company registered in Delaware, charging the restaurant for prime imports we never receive. The cash is being funneled out." Nicholas stared at the folder, then back up at her. He didn't open it. "Is that so? And you, a 22-year-old college dropout, found this when my senior accountants didn't. Your accountants are looking at the macro-level cash flow," Lara countered, refusing to back down. "I'm looking at the garlic. I'm looking at the wagyu. The micro discrepancies add up. Whoever is doing this has stolen nearly $500,000. Nicholas scoffed quietly, leaning back. The stress of the Callaway War was eating him alive. He didn't have time to indulge a paranoid inventory clerk trying to play detective to win his favor. "You're out of your depth, Lara," Nicholas said dismissively. "Take your folder and go back to the kitchen. I won't tell you again." "But Mr. Rossi, the signatures—" "Enough!" Nicholas snapped, the sudden harshness of his voice making Lara jump. "I saved you from the streets. Do not make me regret my charity by becoming a nuisance. Go!" Humiliation burned hot in Lara's cheeks. She looked at the folder, then at Nicholas's hardened face. He truly didn't care. He still saw her as nothing but Arthur Higgins' useless baggage. Without another word, she turned and walked away. But she didn't take the folder. As the kitchen doors swung shut behind her, Frankie Russo shot a nervous, venomous glare at her retreating back. Nicholas finally sighed, picking up his scotch. He glanced at the manila folder sitting on the table. Out of sheer morbid curiosity, he flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page of Lara's immaculate color-coded spreadsheets. Then he turned to the second page. The annoyance on his face slowly vanished, replaced by an icy, terrifying stillness. The dummy corporation Lara had uncovered was named Viper Logistics. Viper, a snake, Victor, the snake Callaway. Frankie wasn't just stealing, he was funding their enemy. 48 hours later, the city of Houston erupted. Nicholas didn't confront Frankie immediately. He needed absolute proof, and he needed to know how deep the rot went. He ordered Leo to silently track Frankie's movements. They discovered that Frankie had arranged a midnight meet with Callaway's lieutenants at an abandoned shipping yard near the river. Nicholas mobilized a strike team. It was supposed to be a surgical hit, cut the snake's head off, execute the traitor, and send a message that the Rossi family was untouchable. But they walked into a slaughterhouse. Frankie had anticipated the move. The moment Nicholas's black SUVs rolled into the shipping yard, the floodlights clicked on, blinding them. Automatic gunfire tore through the night-shattering windshields and tearing through metal. "Ambush, it's a trap!" Leo roared, returning fire with an assault rifle from behind the door of their bullet-riddled Lincoln. Nicholas moved with the lethal grace of a predator, taking down 2 of Callaway's men with precise shots from his Glock. But there were too many. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and copper. Men were falling on both sides. "Leo, fall back, get the men out!" Nicholas shouted over the deafening roar of gunfire. "Not without you, boss!" As Nicholas turned to lay down cover fire for Leo, a shadow emerged from atop a shipping container. Frankie. The traitor held a hunting rifle, his hands shaking as he aimed at the man he had sworn an oath to. Frankie pulled the trigger. The impact felt like being struck by a freight train. The high-caliber round tore through the left side of Nicholas's torso just below his ribs, spinning him violently. He crashed into the wet, freezing mud, his gun sliding out of reach. Pain, white-hot and blinding, consumed him. He could hear Leo screaming his name, but the sound was muffled as if underwater. Adrenaline flooded Nicholas's system, a primal instinct overriding the agony. He couldn't die here in the mud. Clutching his bleeding side, Nicholas rolled under a rusted semi-trailer, dragging himself through the filth as the gunfight raged behind him. He stumbled into the dark labyrinthine alleys of the industrial district, losing blood with every step. The freezing rain washed the crimson away, but his strength was failing rapidly. He walked for what felt like hours, a ghost haunting the shadowed streets of the city he claimed to rule. His vision tunneled. His tailored suit was heavy with blood and rain. He didn't know where he was going until he saw the faint flickering neon sign casting a dim blue glow onto the wet pavement. The Velvet Room. He had subconsciously staggered toward the only place he felt a shred of safety. The restaurant was completely dark closed for the night. The heavy iron security gate at the back alley loading dock was pulled down. Nicholas collapsed against the cold brick wall, sliding down into a sitting position beside the dumpsters. His breathing was shallow and ragged. He pressed his hand hard against the wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. The irony was bitter on his tongue. Nicholas Rossi, the untouchable king of Houston, dying in an alleyway like a stray dog. He let his head fall back against the bricks, waiting for the dark to take him. The loud, metallic rattle of the security door rolling up snapped his eyes open. A figure stepped out onto the loading dock, holding a small flashlight and a clipboard. It was 3 a.m. Who the hell was doing inventory at 3 a.m.? The flashlight beam swept across the alley, freezing on the bloody, broken man slumped against the wall. "Oh my God!" a soft, terrified voice gasped. Lara dropped the clipboard. It clattered loudly against the concrete. She ran to him, falling to her knees in the puddles. The dim blue neon light illuminated her pale face. She looked at the massive pool of blood spreading around him, her hands hovering over his ruined suit, unsure where to even begin. "Mr. Rossi," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Nicholas." He looked up at her through half-lidded eyes. It took monumental effort to speak. "Run, Higgins," he choked out, coughing weakly. They'll be coming to sweep the area. They see you. They kill you." He expected her to flee. Why wouldn't she? He had ruined her life. He had spoken to her with nothing but venom and contempt. This was her chance to be free of him, free of the debt. All she had to do was turn around and walk away. Instead, Lara's storm-glass eyes hardened. The trembling in her hands stopped. "Shut up," she said sharply, a tone he had never heard her use. She grabbed his right arm, draping it over her shoulders. "I'm not leaving you here to die. Now push up. Use your legs. Push." With a groan of agony, Nicholas used the wall and Lara's surprisingly strong leverage to force himself upward. She staggered under his massive weight, wrapping her arm tightly around his waist, uncaring that his blood was soaking into her clothes. Step by agonizing step, she dragged the Mafia Boss out of the freezing rain and into the warmth of the restaurant. She didn't take him to the office. She took him down a set of stone stairs deep into the underground wine cellar. It was a fortress, solid stone walls, a heavy oak door, and completely soundproof. She lowered him onto the floor between racks of priceless vintage wines. Nicholas's eyes were rolling back. He was going into shock. "Stay awake!" Lara ordered, her voice frantic but focused. She ripped off her own sweater, balling it up and pressing it violently against the bullet wound. Nicholas cried out, his hand flying up to grab her wrist in a vice grip. "I know it hurts, but you are bleeding to death," Lara yelled right in his face, not backing down. "I read your file on Frankie. I know what he did. If you die tonight, Frankie takes over, and Frankie will kill me just for knowing about the books. So you don't get to die, Nicholas. Do you hear me?" Through the haze of pain, Nicholas looked up at the girl he had discarded. Her face was smudged with his blood. Her eyes were fierce, blazing with a desperate, beautiful defiance. She wasn't just a lamb. She was a survivor. "Okay," Nicholas whispered, his grip on her wrist softening. The cold, ruthless Mafia Boss finally surrendered to her touch. "I'm awake, Lara. I'm awake." As she worked frantically to bind his wound in the dim light of the cellar, the world above them burned. But down in the dark, the undeniable tension between the broken king and the girl who saved him was just beginning to spark. The cellar of the velvet room smelled of aged oak damp earth and the sharp, overwhelming metallic tang of arterial blood. Nicola's breathing was a horrific, ragged sound, each inhalation a battle against his collapsing lung. Lara's hands were stained crimson up to her wrists. Her ruined sweater, pressed desperately against his side, was entirely soaked through. The dim glow of the single exposed incandescent bulb cast long, nightmarish shadows against the racks of Chateau Margaux and Dom Pérignon. "I can't stop it!" Lara gasped, her voice finally breaking as panic threatened to drown her. "Nicholas, you have to tell me what to do. I can't take you to a hospital. They'll have scouts at every ER in Houston." Nicholas's head rolled to the side, his dark eyes glassy, fighting the encroaching darkness. He lifted a trembling, blood-slicked hand and tapped the breast pocket of his ruined suit jacket. "Phone," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Inside." Lara frantically dug into the pocket, her fingers brushing against the cold, heavy steel of a spare magazine before closing around a sleek black satellite phone. She pulled it out. It was locked with a biometric scanner. She grabbed Nicholas's thumb, pressing it against the screen. The device chimed softly, unlocking to reveal a stark, minimalist interface with only 3 contacts listed. "Call Hayes." Nicholas choked out, his eyes drifting shut. "Tell him, the velvet room. Tell him a snake bit me." Lara tapped the name Mitchell Hayes. The phone didn't ring. It clicked straight through to a secure, encrypted line. "I am currently unavailable," a dry, aristocratic voice answered. "Leave a message." "Dr. Hayes?" Lara cried out, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "This is Lara. I'm with Nicholas Rossi. He's been shot. A high-caliber rifle left side just below the ribs. He's losing too much blood. He told me to tell you a snake bit him. We are in the wine cellar of the velvet room." There was a pause so long Lara thought the call had dropped. Then the voice returned, stripped of its polite detachment. "I know the location," Dr. Hayes said crisply. "I was the chief of trauma at Rush University Medical Center before Nicholas bought my loyalty. I will be there in 12 minutes. Keep pressure on the wound. If he loses consciousness, elevate his legs. Do not let him sleep." The line went dead. The next 12 minutes were the longest of Lara's life. She dragged 2 wooden crates of vintage Pinot Noir over, violently kicking them over to scatter the priceless bottles so she could use the crates to elevate Nicolas' heavy legs. He was frighteningly pale, his skin cold and clammy. "Nicholas, stay with me," she pleaded, slapping his cheek lightly. "Don't you dare die on me after dragging me into this nightmare. You owe me a life. Remember, you said it yourself." His lips twitched into a ghostly, cynical smile. "Always the accountant," he whispered, "tracking the debt." Before Lara could retort, the heavy oak door at the top of the cellar stairs groaned open. Heavy, hurried footsteps descended. Lara snatched Nicholas's discarded Glock from the floor, aiming it upward with shaking hands. "Put the gun down, Miss Higgins," a tall, silver-haired man said as he stepped into the dim light. Dr. Mitchell Hayes carried 2 massive stainless steel trauma kits. He wore a perfectly tailored trench coat over scrubs. He took one look at Nicholas, and his professional demeanor snapped into high gear. "Good girl, you kept him from bleeding out. Now move." Lara scrambled backward as Hayes dropped to his knees, throwing open the kits. The cellar instantly transformed into a makeshift operating room. "The bullet shattered the 11th rib and fragmented—" Hayes muttered more to himself than to Lara as he injected a massive dose of local anesthetic directly into Nicholas's side. He looked up at Lara, his eyes hard. "I need an assistant. Scrub your hands with that bottle of overproof vodka on the shelf. Now." Lara didn't hesitate. She shattered the neck of a bottle of Belvedere, pouring the burning liquid over her blood-soaked hands. For the next hour, Lara lived a waking nightmare. She held steel retractors, her muscles screaming in protest as Hayes dug into the Mafia Boss's flesh, to extract the jagged shards of the bullet. Nicholas was semi-conscious, biting down on a leather wallet to muffle his agonized groans. Every time Lara felt she was going to vomit, she looked at Nicholas's face. The man who had dismissed her as a pathetic piece of collateral was enduring unimaginable pain with a stoic, terrifying willpower. "Got it?" Hayes finally declared, dropping a mangled, bloody piece of lead into a steel basin. It clattered loudly. "Miss Higgins' suture kit, hand it to me." By the time Hayes finished stitching the wound and packing it with hemostatic gauze, the sun was beginning to rise over Houston, sending slivers of gray light through the street-level grates above. Nicholas had finally passed out from exhaustion, and the painkillers Hayes had pushed through an IV line. Dr. Hayes stood up, stripping off his bloody latex gloves. He looked at Lara, his expression softening slightly. "He will survive, but he cannot be moved for at least 48 hours. If that wound tears open, he'll bleed to death internally before I can reach him again." "Thank you, doctor," Lara whispered, sinking onto an overturned crate. "Don't thank me yet," Hayes replied, packing his kits. "The city is tearing itself apart up there. The news is reporting a shootout at the docks. Rumor on the street is that Nicholas Rossi is dead, and Frankie Russo has assumed the position of acting boss. If Frankie finds out Nicholas is breathing, he won't send a sniper next time. He'll send arsonists to burn this building to the ground." Hayes walked up the stairs, pausing at the door. "Keep him quiet, keep him hidden. I'll return tomorrow with antibiotics." As the heavy door clicked shut, Lara looked down at the sleeping king of Houston. The empire above them had fallen, but in the dark, she was the only guard he had left. The next 48 hours tested the absolute limits of Lara's sanity. The Velvet Room remained closed. A handwritten sign on the front door, courtesy of Frankie Russo's orders, cited emergency plumbing repairs. In reality, the restaurant had become a staging ground for the traitors. During the day, Lara could hear the heavy thud of boots on the hardwood floors directly above the cellar. Frankie was using the private dining rooms to hold court with the capo regimes who had flipped to his side. Nicholas drifted in and out of a feverish sleep. His body was fighting a massive infection, his temperature spiking dangerously high. Lara sat beside him on a makeshift bed of winter coats she had stolen from the cloakroom, wiping his forehead with a damp cloth, forcing him to sip water and take the antibiotics Dr. Hayes had left. "Leo," Nicholas murmured during a bout of delirium, his hand gripping Lara's wrist tightly. "Where is Leo?" "I don't know." Lara hushed him softly, brushing his dark hair back. "You have to rest, please, Nicholas." On the night of the second day, Nicholas's fever finally broke. His breathing leveled out and the unnatural flush left his cheeks. Lara, utterly exhausted, had fallen asleep sitting against the wine rack, her head resting near his shoulder. She woke up to the feeling of a heavy, warm hand gently touching her cheek. Lara gasped, her eyes flying open. Nicholas was awake. His dark eyes were clear, sharp, and focused entirely on her. "You're still here," he stated. It wasn't a question. It was a realization laced with profound disbelief. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," Lara deflected, sitting up quickly and smoothing down her wrinkled, stained clothes. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a Mack truck." Nicholas grunted, wincing as he tried to shift his weight. He looked around the cellar, taking in the blood-stained floor, the medical supplies, and the IV pole fashioned from a mop handle. Then he looked back at her. "You saved my life." "Dr. Hayes did most of the work," she replied quietly. "Hayes is a contractor. He works for money. You stayed when you could have walked away. You stayed when you had every reason to let me rot." Nicholas's voice dropped, becoming a low, rough rumble. "I treated you like garbage, Lara. I dismissed you, and you pulled me from the mud." Lara held his gaze, refusing to look away. "I told you, Mr. Rossi, I'm not a victim, and I don't let debts go unpaid. You kept me off the streets. Now we're even." A ghost of a smile touched Nicholas's lips. "Nicholas. Call me Nicholas." Suddenly, the heavy thud of footsteps echoed from the ceiling above them. They both froze. "They're upstairs," Lara whispered, leaning in close so her voice wouldn't carry. "Frankie has been holding meetings all day. He's taken over the syndicate." Nicholas's eyes darkened with cold, murderous rage. "Frankie is a dog who doesn't know how to lead the pack. He'll run the family into the ground." "Worse," Lara said, reaching for a sleek silver laptop she had smuggled down from her office. She opened at the screen, illuminating their faces in the dark. "I've been monitoring the restaurant's mainframe. Frankie isn't just taking over, he's liquidating." Nicholas frowned, ignoring the pain in his side as he leaned closer to look at the screen. "Show me." Lara brought up a heavily encrypted spreadsheet. "When I audited the books, I found the dummy corporation Viper Logistics. But once you got shot, Frankie got sloppy. He stopped hiding his tracks. Over the last 24 hours, he initiated massive wire transfers from the Rossi Syndicate's legitimate holding companies. He's funneling it all through the Cayman National Bank. He's emptying the treasury." Nicholas realized, his jaw clenching. "He knows he can't hold my territory for long. The loyalists will eventually regroup. He's cashing out to buy his seat at Victor Calloway's table." "Exactly." Lara nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's transferring $30 million into an offshore escrow account by midnight tomorrow. If that money clears, you have no family left. The Rossi Syndicate goes bankrupt." Nicholas leaned back against the stone wall, running a hand over his face. He was trapped in a basement, a physical wreck, and his empire was being stolen keystroke by keystroke. For the first time in his life, Nicholas Rossi felt entirely powerless. "Can you stop the transfer?" Nicholas asked, looking at her with a new intense reliance. Lara bit her lip. "No. The authorizations require a dual authentication token. Frankie has yours, probably stole it from your penthouse, but what?" "I can't stop the money from leaving Houston," Lara said, a dangerous, brilliant spark lighting up her storm-glass eyes. "But I can change where it lands." Nicholas stared at the 22-year-old girl in front of him as if he were seeing her for the very first time. The frail, terrified daughter of a gambling addict was entirely gone. In her place sat a strategist, a woman whose weapon of choice wasn't a gun but a ledger. "Explain," Nicholas demanded softly. "My father," Lara began, a bitter edge to her voice, "was an idiot. But he was an idiot who gambled with some very sophisticated bookies. Before he borrowed from your syndicate, he owed money to the Russian Bratva operating out of Brighton Beach. To keep them off his back, I had to learn how to manipulate routing numbers to create ghost accounts, temporary digital vaults that vanish the moment money enters them." Nicholas's eyes widened slightly. "You stole from the Bratva." I delayed them," Lara corrected. "But the principle is the same. Frankie is routing the $30 million to Victor Calloway's Cayman account. He's using a specific SWIFT code. If I can get a hardline connection to the restaurant's main server router upstairs, I can inject a script that intercepts the transfer at the exact moment of execution. And reroute it where?" Lara looked him dead in the eye. "To an untraceable, decentralized cryptocurrency wallet that only you hold the keys to. Calloway gets nothing. Frankie looks like he stole the money from Calloway, and the snake will kill him for the betrayal." It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was a mafia execution carried out via a keyboard. Nicholas let out a low, rough laugh, though it ended in a grimace of pain. "And to think I put you in a windowless office doing inventory. You underestimated me," Lara said simply. "I did," Nicholas agreed, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. He reached out his large, calloused hand, wrapping gently around hers. His thumb brushed against her knuckles. The physical contact sent an unexpected shockwave through Lara's system. "I won't make that mistake again, Lara, but you're talking about going upstairs, into the den. If Frankie catches you near that server—" "He won't," Lara said, though her heart pounded against her ribs at the thought. "They drink heavily during these meetings. By 2 a.m., the guards at the back door are usually half asleep. The main server room is just past the kitchen. I only need 5 minutes to plug in my laptop and upload the script." Nicholas' grip on her hand tightened. He hated this. He was the head of the family. It was his job to protect his people, to take the risks. Sending this girl, this incredibly brave, beautiful girl, into the line of fire tore at his pride and something much deeper that he wasn't ready to name. "I don't like it," he growled. "You don't have to like it," Lara shot back, pulling her hand away gently to focus on the laptop. "You just have to trust me." The next day dragged on with agonizing slowness. Lara spent hours coding the intercept script, her eyes burning from the harsh blue light of the screen. Nicholas watched her studying the delicate curve of her neck, the intense furrow of her brow. He found himself captivated not just by her intelligence, but by her quiet, unyielding strength. She was his salvation, not just from the bullet in his side, but from the crumbling ruins of his own arrogance. At 2 a.m., the restaurant above them grew quiet. The muffled shouts and clinking glasses ceased. Lara closed the laptop and slipped it into a sleek black messenger bag. She looked at Nicholas. He had managed to sit up straighter, holding the Glock in his right hand. 5 minutes. "Lara," Nicholas warned, his voice deadly serious. "If you aren't back down those stairs in 5 minutes, I am coming up there, torn stitches or not." "Stay put," she ordered, giving him a small, reassuring smile. Lara slowly unlatched the heavy oak door. It creaked in protest, but the sound was swallowed by the hum of the restaurant's industrial refrigerators. She slipped out into the dark hallway. The air was thick with the smell of stale cigar smoke and spilled whiskey. She moved silently, her socks gliding over the hardwood floor. She passed the kitchen, throwing a quick glance toward the loading dock. A single guard sat in a chair, his head thrown back, snoring softly. Lara crept past him, reaching the heavy steel door of the server room. It was locked. She pulled a master key from her pocket, a perk of being the inventory manager, and slid it into the lock. It clicked with a heart-stopping clack. She froze. The guard shifted in his chair, muttering something in his sleep, but didn't wake. Exhaling a shaky breath, Lara slipped inside the server room, closing the door behind her. The room was freezing, filled with the hum of cooling fans and the blinking green lights of the Rossi Syndicate's digital nervous system. She opened her laptop, plugging a thick Ethernet cable directly into the main router. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the restaurant's basic firewalls. Uploading intercept script. 10%. 30%. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold room. She watched the progress bar crawl. The wire transfer to Callaway was scheduled to automatically execute at 3 a.m. It was currently 2:14 a.m. 70%, 90%, upload complete. Lara let out a breath she felt she had been holding for days. She had done it. She packed up her laptop, ready to slip back down to the safety of the cellar. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard voices. They were loud right outside the server room. "Eat, found him bleeding out in a safe house near the river," a gruff voice said. "Does Frankie know?" another asked. "Yeah, he's furious. Says to bring him to the main dining room. He wants to interrogate him before he puts a bullet in his head." Lara pressed her ear against the freezing steel door, her blood turning to ice. "The guy is tough, I'll give him that," the first voice chuckled. "Leo Moretti doesn't break easily." Lara slapped a hand over her mouth to muffle a gasp. Leo, Nicholas's right-hand man. He wasn't dead. He had survived the ambush at the docks, but Frankie's men had found him, and they were bringing him here to execute him. Lara had a choice. She could wait for the men to leave, slip back down to the cellar, and tell Nicholas that Leo was about to die. But by the time Nicholas dragged himself up the stairs, it would be too late, or she could do something incredibly stupid. Lara looked at the heavy fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to the server racks. She took a deep breath, the accountant fading away, replaced entirely by a soldier of the Rossi family. Lara gripped the heavy red fire extinguisher, her knuckles turning white. She pulled the metal safety pin with her teeth, spitting it onto the server room floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wasn't a killer. She wasn't a mobster. She was an accountant who preferred spreadsheets to shotguns. But the man bleeding out in the cellar needed his general, and Lara was the only one who could deliver him. She pressed her ear against the freezing steel door. The heavy, dragging footsteps grew louder. "Keep him moving," the gruff voice ordered. "Frankie is waiting in the main dining room. He wants to do it on the plastic tarp so the carpets don't get ruined." "I'm going to rip Frankie's throat out with my teeth," a raspy, blood-choked voice spat back. "Leo." Lara took a deep breath, shoved the heavy steel door open, and stepped directly into the hallway. The two guards froze in absolute shock. They expected an ambush by rival hitmen, not a 22-year-old girl in a blood-stained skirt holding a fire extinguisher. Lara didn't give them a chance to process. She squeezed the trigger. A massive, deafening hiss filled the narrow corridor as a blinding cloud of thick white chemical foam erupted from the nozzle. "What the hell?" The first guard screamed, dropping Leo's arm to claw at his burning eyes. Lara lunged forward through the whiteout. She swung the heavy metal cylinder with every ounce of strength her adrenaline-fueled body could muster. It connected with the side of the second guard's head with a sickening crack. He crumpled to the floor instantly. The first guard, still blinded and choking on the foam, reached blindly for the pistol at his waistband. Lara didn't think. She just reacted. She threw the empty fire extinguisher directly at his chest, knocking the wind out of him, then kicked him squarely in the groin. He went down gasping for air. Leo Moretti, his face a bruised and bloody mess, stared up at her from the floor, his hands still zip-tied behind his back. "Higgins?" Leo coughed, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. "What? How? Can you walk?" Lara demanded, dropping to her knees and pulling a pocket knife from her messenger bag to saw frantically through his plastic restraints. "Yeah," Leo grunted, wincing as his hands were freed. He grabbed a fallen pistol from the groaning guard. "But we need to get out of here. Frankie has a dozen men upstairs." "Follow me," Lara whispered, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the kitchen. They moved like ghosts through the shadows of the restaurant, slipping past the still sleeping guard at the loading dock and descended the stone stairs into the wine cellar. When Lara pushed the heavy oak door open, Nicholas had his Glock leveled at the entrance. The moment he saw Leo, the tension drained from his face, replaced by a profound, exhausted relief. He lowered the weapon. "Boss!" Leo breathed, hurrying over to where Nicholas was propped up against the wine racks. "They said you were dead. The whole city thinks you're in the river. Takes more than a traitor with a rifle to drown me, Leo." Nicholas said, his voice weak but laced with steel. His dark eyes shifted to Lara. He saw the chemical foam clinging to her hair, the wild look in her storm-glass eyes. "What did you do, Lara?" "I improvised," she said breathlessly, dropping her messenger bag and opening her laptop. The screen cast a blue glow over her face. "It's 2:58 a.m., 2 minutes until Frankie's wire transfer goes through." Leo looked between the two of them, utterly bewildered. "Wire transfer boss Frankie has taken over the syndicate. He's up there drinking your scotch and dividing your territory." "He's liquidating," Nicholas corrected grimly, wincing as he shifted his weight. "He's stealing $30 million from the legitimate holding companies to buy a seat with Victor Calloway, but Lara is about to relieve him of his retirement fund." Leo stared at the petite girl typing furiously on the keyboard. "You done," Lara announced, hitting the final key with a sharp clack. At precisely 3 a.m., the script executed. In the penthouse office of Victor Calloway across the city, an expected notification of a $30 million deposit failed to arrive. In the cellar of the Velvet Room, Lara watched the progress bar on her screen flash green. Transfer rerouted. Wallet balance updated. "It's over," Lara breathed, turning the laptop so Nicholas could see. $30 million sitting in a decentralized wallet that only you can access. Frankie just sent empty air to the Caymans. Nicholas looked at the screen, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his pale face. Calloway is going to skin him alive for this. Suddenly, the muffled sound of a cell phone ringing echoed from the dining room above them. It was faint, but in the dead silence of the night it was unmistakable. A moment later, the ringing stopped. Then came the scream. It was a howl of pure, unadulterated terror and rage. It was Frankie. Calloway just called him Nicholas deduced, his eyes hardening. He knows the money didn't land. Heavy, frantic footsteps thundered across the hardwood floors above. Furniture was being smashed. "Find him!" Frankie's voice roared through the floorboards, muffled but hysterical. He didn't make it to the river. Find Rossi, tear this place apart. Leo racked the slide of his pistol, moving to stand between the cellar door and Nicholas. "They're going to sweep the building, boss. It won't take them long to find this door." Nicholas looked at Lara. The adrenaline was fading, and she was beginning to tremble. She'd been incredibly brave, but she was entirely out of her depth in a firefight. "Lara," Nicholas said, his voice surprisingly gentle, commanding her attention. "Get behind the wine racks. Do not come out until I tell you." "But Nicholas, you can't." "Do as I say," he ordered the Mafia Boss, returning to the surface. "You saved my life, and you saved my empire. I am not letting you die in this basement." Lara hesitated, then grabbed her laptop and scrambled behind a towering rack of vintage Barolo, squeezing into the dark, dusty corner. Above them, the footsteps grew closer. The heavy wooden door at the top of the stairs rattled violently as someone yanked on the handle. "Hey, this door's locked from the inside!" a voice shouted. "Break it down!" Frankie screamed. Nicholas forced himself up, using a wooden crate for leverage. The pain in his side was blinding, a white-hot agony that threatened to send him back into shock. He ignored it. He was the king of Houston. He would not die sitting down. With his Glock in his right hand, Nicholas stood shoulder to shoulder with Leo, waiting in the dim light as the wood began to splinter. Crash! The heavy oak door at the top of the stairs finally gave way under the assault of a sledgehammer. Wood splinters rained down the stone steps. The beam of high-powered tactical flashlights pierced the gloom of the cellar, sweeping wildly across the racks of priceless wine. "Go, go, go!" Frankie's voice bellowed from the hallway. 3 heavily armed men rushed down the narrow stone staircase, their assault rifles raised. "Drop your weapons!" Leo roared from the shadows, stepping into the edge of the light, his pistol aimed squarely at the chest of the lead man. The men froze. They were syndicate soldiers, men who had taken blood oaths to the Rossi family. Seeing Leo Moretti alive, standing tall and defiant, sent a ripple of hesitation through them. "Don't stop, you idiots! Shoot them!" Frankie yelled, pushing his way past his men to the bottom of the stairs. He held a silver revolver, his face slick with panic-induced sweat. His eyes were manic, darting wildly around the cellar. Then Nicholas stepped forward. He looked like a nightmare. His tailored suit was a ruined, blood-soaked rag. His face was pale, shadowed by days of fever and pain, but his dark eyes burned with an icy, lethal authority that sucked the oxygen out of the room. He didn't raise his gun. He simply stood there, a towering monument to violence and power. "Hello, Frankie," Nicholas said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, terrifying rumble that echoed off the stone walls. The 3 syndicate soldiers lowered their rifles instinctively. This was their boss. This was the man who had built them, fed them, and protected them. "Don't listen to him!" Frankie shrieked, aiming his revolver directly at Nicholas's chest. "He's weak. He's dead. The Rossi family is mine now." "Is it?" Nicholas asked calmly, leaning slightly against a wine barrel to mask his trembling legs. "Because from where I'm standing, Frankie, you look like a dead man walking." Frankie laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "I have the men, I have the guns." "But you don't have the money," Nicholas countered smoothly. Frankie's face went completely white. His hand shook. How do you know about that?" Nicholas looked at the 3 soldiers. "Your new boss tried to sell you out. He liquidated the holding companies. He was trying to wire $30 million to Victor Calloway in exchange for amnesty and a seat at his table. He was going to leave all of you here to rot when the feds and the rival families came to pick over the bones of my empire." The soldiers exchanged uncertain, angry glances. One of them, a massive enforcer named Carmine, looked at Frankie. "Is that true? You were giving the war chest to the snake." "He's lying!" Frankie screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "Shoot him! Calloway just called you, didn't he, Frankie?" Nicholas pushed his voice, turning cruel. "He's angry. The money didn't arrive, because I have it. I intercepted the transfer. Frankie stared at Nicholas, his mind fracturing. He was trapped. If he killed Nicholas, he got no money and Calloway would kill him for failing to deliver the bribe. If he didn't kill Nicholas, he was dead anyway. Carmine, Nicholas said quietly, never taking his eyes off Frankie. Put your gun down, all of you. You were following orders from a man you thought was your new boss. I forgive the trespass. But if you stand with this traitor for one more second, you die with him. The cellar was dead silent save for the hum of the refrigerators upstairs and the ragged breathing of Frankie Russo. Carmine lowered his rifle completely. He stepped back. The other two men immediately followed suit, stepping away from Frankie as if he were suddenly radioactive. No, you cowards, Frankie screamed, turning his revolver on Carmine. It was a fatal mistake. Before Frankie could pull the trigger, 2 shots rang out in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Leo's pistol smoked. Nicholas' Glock smoked. Frankie Russo stood frozen for a split second, 2 dark red circles blossoming on his chest. His revolver slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the stone floor. He stared at Nicholas with wide, uncomprehending eyes before his knees buckled. He collapsed in a heap, bleeding out onto the cold stone floor of the cellar he had tried to turn into a tomb. Silence descended again, heavy and absolute. Nicholas slowly lowered his gun. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright vanished instantly. His vision swam and his knees gave out. "Boss!" Leo yelled, lunging forward to catch Nicholas before he hit the ground. From the shadows behind the vintage Barolo, Lara emerged. She ran to Nicholas's side, uncaring of the dead man bleeding out nearby. She dropped to her knees, grabbing Nicholas's face, her thumbs brushing across his cheekbones. "Nicholas, stay awake!" She pleaded, her voice cracking. He looked up at her, the cold, ruthless mafia boss fading away, leaving only the man she had saved. He reached up, his bloody hand resting over hers against his cheek. "We did it, Higgins," he whispered, a faint smile touching his lips before his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness completely. 3 weeks later. The rain in Houston had finally given way to clear, crisp autumn skies. The city hummed with life, completely oblivious to the war that had been fought and won in its shadows. Nicholas stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking out over the skyline. He wore a crisp white button-down shirt unbuttoned at the collar and dark trousers. He moved a little stiffly, leaning slightly on a silver-tipped cane to keep weight off his healing side, but the color had returned to his face. He was once again the undisputed king of Houston. Victor Calloway was dead, found in the trunk of a car at O'Hare Airport. With the $30 million safely secured and the traitor eliminated, Leo had rallied the Rossi loyalists and crushed the Calloway faction in a matter of days. The empire was secure, but the penthouse felt remarkably empty. The heavy mahogany doors to his office opened, and Leo stepped in. "The shipping unions agreed to our terms," Leo reported, dropping a thick file onto the desk. He hesitated for a moment, watching his boss. "Also, the driver is waiting downstairs." Nicholas turned slowly. "Is she packed?" "Yes, boss. She cleared out the room above the restaurant an hour ago. She has 2 suitcases. Leo paused, his voice softening. "You're really just going to let her leave after everything she did?" Nicholas looked back out the window, his jaw tightening. "She's not a criminal, Leo. She's an accountant, a civilian. She got dragged into this life because of her father's sins. The debt is paid. The ledger is clear. She deserves to go back to the light where she belongs." "With all due respect, boss," Leo said, turning to leave, "she didn't look like a civilian when she bashed my guard's head in with a fire extinguisher." The doors clicked shut, leaving Nicholas alone with the agonizing truth. He didn't want her to go. The thought of never seeing those storm glass eyes again, of never hearing her sharp, defiant retorts, felt like a bullet to the chest, far worse than the one Frankie had put in him. But he was darkness, and she was light. Keeping her would be the most selfish act of his life. Downstairs, a sleek black town car was idling by the curb. Lara stood on the sidewalk holding a small travel bag. She wore a simple beige trench coat, her dark hair blowing gently in the autumn wind. The driver was loading her 2 suitcases into the trunk. She had a new identity, a massive trust fund secured in a Swiss bank account, Nicholas's way of ensuring she never had to worry about money again, and a plane ticket to Paris. It was everything she could have ever dreamed of. So why did her heart feel like it was shattering into a million pieces? "Ready to go, Miss Higgins?" the driver asked gently, holding the back door open for her. Lara looked up at the towering glass facade of the Rossi penthouse. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was up there. He hadn't even come down to say goodbye. He had sent Leo with the money and the tickets. It was a clean professional severance. "Yes," Lara whispered, her throat tight with unshed tears. "I'm ready." She climbed into the back seat, the heavy leather door shutting with a hollow thud. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the bustling Houston traffic. Lara closed her eyes, letting a single tear slip down her cheek. It was over. She had survived. 10 minutes later, the town car suddenly pulled to the side of the road, stopping near a quiet park overlooking Lake Michigan. Lara opened her eyes, frowning. "Is something wrong?" "The airport is the other way." The driver didn't answer. He simply unlocked the doors and stepped out of the car, walking away down the pavement. A moment later, the opposite rear door opened, letting in a rush of cold air. Lara's breath hitched. Nicholas slid into the back seat next to her. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne sandalwood and expensive whiskey. He leaned his cane against the seat in front of them, turning his dark, intense eyes onto her. Lara stammered, completely caught off guard. "What are you doing here? Leo said you were in a meeting." "I lied to Leo," Nicholas said smoothly. "But the driver works for me," Nicholas interrupted. Lara glared at him, a spark of her old defiance flaring up. She swiped the tear from her cheek angrily. "Is this a joke to you? You put me in a car, you send me away without even a goodbye, and now you ambush me on the way to the airport." "I was trying to do the right thing," Nicholas said, his voice dropping, losing its authoritative edge. He looked suddenly vulnerable, a king laying down his crown. "I was trying to let you go. You belong in Paris, Lara. You belong in art galleries and cafes, not dodging bullets in a wine cellar." "You don't get to tell me where I belong," Lara fired back, her chest heaving. "I make my own choices, and my choice was to stay and fight for you." Nicola reached out, his large hand gently wrapping around hers. The warmth of his touch sent a familiar jolt through her system. "Do you remember the first night you were brought to my office?" Nicholas asked softly. Lara swallowed hard, looking down at their joined hands. "Yes, you were horrible. I told you that I didn't want you, that I never did." Lara flinched slightly. "I remember." Nicholas lifted his free hand, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he was capable of. "I don't want you. I never did." Nicholas repeated, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a burning, undeniable intensity. Because want implies a fleeting desire. It implies something you can live without once the novelty fades. Lara's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't look away from him. "I don't want you, Lara," Nicholas murmured, leaning in closer, his lips hovering mere inches from hers. "I need you. You are the only light in my dark world. You pulled me from the mud, and you saved my soul. If you get on that plane, I will spend the rest of my life wishing I was dead in that alley." A sob broke from Lara's lips. All the fear, all the tension, all the unsaid words of the past 3 weeks shattered in an instant. "Then ask me to stay," she whispered, tears freely falling down her cheeks. "Stay," Nicholas pleaded, his voice a rough, desperate rasp. "Stay with me, rule this city with me." Lara didn't answer with words. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips desperately to his. Nicholas groaned, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her across the seat and onto his lap, uncaring of the dull throb in his side. He kissed her with all the pent-up passion, terror, and love of a man who had finally found his salvation. The Mafia king had been brought to his knees not by a bullet, but by the storm-glass eyes of the girl he thought he could throw away. Wow, what an incredible ending. From a terrifying debt to a powerful empire, ruled by the king and his brilliant Queen Lara, and Nicholas's story proves that sometimes the very thing we try to throw away becomes our absolute salvation. We hope you loved this heart-pounding mafia romance drama as much as we love telling it. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please give this video a huge thumbs up. Don't forget to share it with your friends who love a good twist. And absolutely hit that subscribe button so you never miss another epic, thrilling tale from our channel. See you next time.